The meeting is public. I'll check to see if it needs to be moved over. Okay. If Jane is here. Happy to see her. Hi, Jane. Okay, would you like me to read the opening statement?
Yep.
The community. Oh, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the October 17th, 2022 meeting of the East Bay Community Energy Community Advisory Committee. Adrian, can you please read that?
Great, thank you. Cynthia Landry. Cynthia Landry?
Present.
Thank you. Member Hugh?
Present.
Member Lou?
Present.
Thank you. Member Swaminathan? Member Swaminathan? Member Lakshman? Member Lakshman? Member Taria? Member Taria? Member Pacheco? Pacheco? Member Souza?
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Hernandez?
Present.
Member Lutz?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you. And Member Carr is serving as an alternate for Vice Chair Mutzenberg.
Yes, please.
Thank you. And Chair Eldridge.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have the disclaimer statements?
Yes, we do.
It'd be good if you could read that.
Great, thank you. This Community Advisory Committee is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Brown Act to facilitate teleconferencing and to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. Ordinarily, the Brown Act sets strict rules for teleconferencing. AB 361 suspends some of these rules during a state of emergency where state and local officials have recommended social distancing. The Brown Act continues to require that we notice meetings in advance and allow the public to participate. The Community Advisory Committee has met all of the applicable notice requirements, and the public is welcome to participate in this meeting. If you wish to be recognized during public comment, please fill out a public comment speaker form found at ebce.org/meetings and use the raise hand feature in Zoom. You will be recognized for 3 minutes. Comments can also be submitted online at ebce.org/meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. So as we do have quorum and we have established that, next we will go to public comment. And I want to emphasize that public comment is reserved for members of the public who would like to make comments on items that are not on this evening's agenda. Anyone wishing to make a comment on items that are on tonight's agenda will be heard during that item. There was a late addition to the notes where an item that is covered in the board meeting, which is the Healthy Communities presentation, will be covered tonight during my chair report. So if your comment is on that item, please hold it. It is just 2 items from now. So Adrian, were there any public comments received prior to 5 p.m. yesterday, or are there any members of the public with their hands raised?
We have received no public comment speaker form comments. We do have 2 hands raised. I'll recognize Tom Kelly and Jessica Tovar. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. And good evening. I sent the CAC the power content labels for 2021 that I received from the California Energy Commission. And, you know, I hope you have had a chance to take a look at them, because it demonstrates once again that EBCE's default product, Right Choice, is one of the worst and most polluting products of just about all the load serving entities in Northern California. And I hope you might even have some questions about it for me. Let me just point out the highlights. PG&E is in position 5 at 98 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. And EBCE is almost 6 times greater than that at 564 pounds and is ranked 11th. It's even higher than the average for all California, all utilities in California. You can take a look and see that EBCE falls behind PG&E on renewables. And I'll just point out again, going back to the JPA, that we're supposed to be better than PG&E on GHGs. There have been promises that we would be better than PG&E on renewables, and we're not. So I have to ask you, you've heard me drum on about this for months, years now. What are we going to do about it? Or is the point that it doesn't matter? Is it like, this is okay? It's okay to be a dirty power provider in spite of the fact that some of us devoted our lives to forming this CCA in order to cut greenhouse gas emissions. And let me just say, I hope we get somebody from Stockton on this CAC pretty soon, because they went into their agreement to join EBCE based on the fact that they thought they were going to get a cheaper product and improve their power mix. In fact, EBCE's press release on it sort of implies that that's exactly what's going to happen. But on January 1st, 2024, when Stockton, comes on board, if this trend continues, they're going to see an immediate, almost 6 times greater than PG&E on greenhouse gas emissions. So, I mean, put me out of my misery, you guys. If this is like just, you're tired of hearing about it and you're not going to do anything about it, then fine. But don't, either do something or let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Devar, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Just a few quick comments. I appreciate clearing up. I was kind of concerned that there wasn't the item, that Healthy Communities Partnership item that is on the board agenda, and I didn't see that here, and I'm glad that it's going to be discussed today, because I think it's very important for the Community Advisory Committee to be able to weigh in, especially on an issue that has brought together so many members of the community, so many comments. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, in these documents, it's helpful to clarify acronyms. For whatever reason, it took me a while to figure out that PHP actually stands for Public Health Partnership. And it would just be easier if when you use acronyms like that, if you can at least spell them out in the beginning of your documents, because it becomes kind of unclear. And I think that the use of acronyms in the clean energy space is very much kind of, alienating when you don't, understand what those things stand for or what they are. So just having clarity in documents like that, and certainly making sure that these items are reflected in the agendas, so that we get everybody to weigh in on the issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Alita Dupree, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Olivia. Alita Dupree, for the record, my pronouns are she and her. It's good to be back with you. I just got in the meeting. So I did get to spend a weekend in the Bay Area, just 2 nights. I stayed in Emeryville. And of course, as always, I thought about EBCE. And coming home to Oakland and Emeryville, it's kind of like coming home. Even though I don't use a lot of electricity. I can't say for sure if the hotels that I stay in have accounts with EBCE. I hope they do. I know that specific customer information can't be revealed, but hopefully we could see some trends as to whether the large commercial and industrial properties in EBC territory are in fact doing business with EBC, because then I can know that when I turn on the light in the hotel room or use the kitchen or the fridge, or that I am participating more directly in the work of EBC. How do we get to the next step? I know we're going to talk about a lot of things tonight, and I do think a lot about cleaner power and electrification, and presenting these things in ways that impact positively people in equity priority communities. I'm a renter. I don't have my own real estate. When I come to Emeryville and Oakland, I'm staying in a room of some kind. I'm generally riding buses and trains, of which, hopefully they will be electric and buy electricity from EBC. That's 100% renewable. But as one who doesn't own much, the chance to participate through the power of sharing is most meaningful to me. So instead of owning a car, I take buses and trains or a ride share. And what if all buses and all ride share can be electric? What if all the trains can be electric? BART is, but not the Capital Corridor. So we have a lot of work to do, but I look forward to it being done because I can see the good result that's going to come out of it. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you, Adrian. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of the meeting minutes from September 19th, 2022. Is there any discussion on this item from members of this community or any public comment that has been submitted prior to 5 p.m. yesterday, or any members of the public interest?
There are no comments submitted for this item, and there are no hands raised for this item.
Excellent. Seeing no discussion, I would be looking for a motion to approve.
So moved, Jim Lutz.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
I'll second Cynthia Landry.
Thank you, Cynthia. Motion to approve by member Lutz and seconded by member Landry. Can we please call a roll call vote?
Great, thank you. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Hugh.
Yes.
Member Lou.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan. Member Lakshman. Member Talria. Member Pacheco. Member Souza. Member Souza.
Sorry about that. My unmute button wasn't working. Yes.
Thank you. Member Carr.
Yes.
Member Hernandez.
Yes.
Member Lutz.
Yes.
Chair Eldridge.
Yes.
The minutes are approved.
Thank you. We're next going to go into the chair report. This is a really substantial report, and the reason my head is facing this direction is because this is where my other monitor is. And so I need to look at it to try and get all of this out. And we have a really big meeting today. And so I'm going to do the best that I can on this and keep us a bit on time. So first, Jane. Jane is here, is that correct?
Yes, Jane is here.
And Jane, we adore you. And thank you so much for all of your time with us. It is just phenomenal how much you have contributed to this project and to the development of everyone's thinking and perspective who had the absolute honor to serve with you. And super best of luck on your next adventures. I think that you wanted to say something, is that correct?
Yeah, well, thank you, Anna Olivia, and everybody, really, Adrian, Alex, Jessica, so many people. I mean, it's just been such a great journey to serve with you guys on this committee. I remember when I was asked to join and my son was like not even 1 year old yet. And I thought, well, if I do this, when I'm done, he's going to be in kindergarten. So it's kind of amazing now to be here 4 years later and my son's in kindergarten and EBCE has grown up so much, and to see many of these programs begin to be implemented and just the wonderful reputation that's being built in the community. And certainly there's always more work to be done, but I've just learned a tremendous amount from this experience, and just appreciate all of you and the service that you continue to provide for our community. So thank you. I'll be cheering you guys on from as a ratepayer, and look forward to seeing the wonderful work to come.
We will miss you so much. We already miss you so much. You're just incredible. And thank you again. I know we have a package of goodies for you and a card that should be sent around now.
I got the card. Thank you so much. It's so touched by that. So really, really moving. So I will keep that forever. Thank you.
You're a total rock star, and we are going to try and pull you into some like think tank type groups in the future. I'm just determined.
Are we gonna, Madam Chair, are we going to be taking comments from the taking additional kudos from the from our group?
If folks would like to do that, I think that it would be easy to fill 2 or 3 hours with that. Yes, don't fill 2 or 3 hours with it, but you bet absolutely pour all the affection on Jane you possibly can.
Yes, so
go for it.
So Jane, I would also like to wish you the best. I thank you for your patience, your knowledge, and your camaraderie and collaboration on this council. And I will miss you, and the members of the community appreciate your many contributions. And I'm not real good on technology at times, so my name may not be on the card, but my name is there.
Thank you, Cynthia. I've learned so much from you as well. Just an amazing perspective, and so I really appreciate. It means so much to me to hear your appreciation, and I appreciate you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, and the best to you. And we'll be crossing paths again soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
I guess, is there anyone in the public who'd like to say something to Jane?
Yes, Jessica Tovar has her hand raised. I recognize her for 3 minutes.
I forgot. I figured, yeah.
So.
Hello, Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I totally can, talking and appreciating Jane for all these years that you contributed to the Community Advisory Committee, and yeah, just a super duper appreciation in these formative years. And I always get excited about women weighing in on issues and spaces that we were traditionally kept out of. So I just want to appreciate you, and Wow, that's amazing that you are the mother of a 5-year-old. That's amazing. Yeah, I will definitely reach out to you offline. I would love to catch up. And on behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance, just say huge thank you, sending you a huge virtual hug. I mean, you helped us during a very hard time, even through the pandemic. So yeah, thank you very much, Jean.
Thank you, Jessica. Please do reach out.
Right. Seeing no other hands raised, am I looking at that wrong? I would, I just really want to thank you, and also give a huge thank to Lisa who has stepped into a permanent position on East Bay Community Energy. It is a huge honor to be able to work with you more regularly, and we are super grateful that you are here. Member Souza?
Yes, I just also wanted to say thank you to Jane. I wasn't here very long, but I don't want to take any time just saying it, but I definitely want to weigh in and say thank you. Thank you, Jane.
Oh, thank you, Mickey.
Okay. You're Adrian, are you going like this?
Oh, just real quick. Yeah, I just wanted to also say thank you to Jane. You've been an inspiration to me when I was a little guppy here, learning the position. So thank you for your support.
Oh, thank you, Adrian, for keeping us all organized all the time. This does not happen without you. Thank you.
Okay, I really, I will contact you, Jane, and gush all over you. It's gonna happen. I'm just so grateful for you, just so very much. I am gonna go onto this because we have a grip of stuff to get through. And there are not sufficient words to express the level of my gratitude for you. All right, guys, starting next month, we will have the option, if you want, for both the public and members to participate in person if you want. That meeting will be held in the new office in Oakland near the 12th Street BART. That will be duly noticed and posted. It is right by the BART station. And but this is a voluntary participation in person. If you or your family members have a medical condition, or you have children, or are doing elder care, or it is a very long commute, or it is too late at night to take public transportation, you can still utilize the option encoded in current law that allows us to remote into these meetings for both the public and members. So just know that starting next month, we will have an in-person option. It is voluntary. And Cynthia.
I just wanted to say, when we were in person, I do work in North County, so probably this may not be a problem. We were starting at 7. So would we be keeping the same start time if we,
we will currently be keeping the 6 o'clock start time, at least for these sessions, as there is still a remote option. It's going to be a real problem if things have to go to mandatory in person, as we would have people commuting from Stockton,
right,
and Tracy, and it would be really, really challenging. And staff is doing their best to try and figure out how to make sure that we're not being a really active environmental atrocity and making people commute for hours to participate in civic engagement and public process. So I am grateful for their hard work on this issue. It affects them and the board just as much as it affects us. But yes, we will currently be keeping the 6 p.m. start time.
Okay.
To do a quick follow-up, and we really can't go into discussion on all of them, but we will be revisiting all of these things. I wanted to give quick follow-ups to some of the requests for future agenda items. We will be getting a jobs report, including a union jobs created report. We did get something from staff saying that they were hoping to get in an accurate and up-to-date tally by the end of next week. And, oh, sorry, at the end of last week, and that they would send that to me as soon as they got it. I have not yet received that. They did say that staff prefers to release union labor hour figures retrospectively instead of prospectively. They want to make sure that they're actual hours that occurred as opposed to looking at things in the past. Your hand is raised, Alex. Did you have updated numbers? You're muted and
Hi, thank you, Chair Eldred. Yes, so I have an update. We are getting those numbers, and I apologize for not getting those to you sooner. I'm home with a sick kid right now, but we do have some of those numbers. So what I would propose is to send those out to the committee once they're fully baked, which should be in the next couple of days.
If it's sent out to us, we have to make sure that would be wonderful, and just we have to make sure to post it online so that anything we get, the public gets as well. I appreciate your work on that, absolutely. I also wanted to give a follow-up on the call center. We did receive a response from staff. I did not find it remotely satisfying, so we will be visiting this later again. I will read to you what they turned in. And for those of you who are new, the issue of a call center was one of the most unbelievably contentious issues in our community. It resulted in lawsuits. It resulted in all kinds of really fun things. And there were some justifications that were put forth to temporarily use an external service with a promise to the directors and the CAC, as well as the public, that we would have a timeline and a plan. I believe it was within a year, and then within 2 years, we would have in-house call center staff. They have responded now 4 years later with 4 years, sorry. Have we been open 4 years? Ish, a bit, right. With SMUD provides award-winning customer service. They're unionized. They are highly recognized public power provider. Its mission aligns with CCA's. It's the 6th largest community-owned not-for-profit in the nation and has been serving California utility customers for over 70 years. And to help create more EBCE service area-based jobs, SMUD has worked closely with EBCE staff to actively recruit EBCE customers and residents to apply for open and new call center positions. I would like to remind staff that these are the reasons that the temporary external, like use of external call center was granted with a plan to bring it in house. So we will be revisiting this agenda item in the future for sure. EBCE, this is still from staff, continues to create new jobs and staff positions and actively recruits candidates from within our service area. In the last year, EBCE's marketing and account services team has hired 5 new staff members and has 2 currently open positions. So if you know anyone who should apply, get the word out, need good people. And again, these were the reasons that the temporary use of an external service was approved on a very limited time basis and what was able to bring about labor peace. So we encourage and look forward to seeing a plan to move that in-house ideally soon. But Cynthia, I promise we will revisit this on an agenda.
Thank you.
The real shame of my computer crashing is my summary of the last board meeting was erased. And so there were a couple things that came up though. And one of them is I seconded a motion and was informed by staff that I was not allowed to second a motion. And so I have gone back and reread the JPA and then consulted with some of the folks that helped create EBCE when it was still in-house in the county before we selected our current CEO and hired our current staff. And the only restriction in Alameda County on ex officio board members is that of voting. That is reflected in our JPA, and a ex officio member can in fact make and second motions, but cannot vote on them. And that was a pretty thoroughly hashed out discussion, as all things related to what the CAC was going to be able to do and could not do was thoroughly hashed out. Chair Haggerty and Vice Chair Kalb at the time both encouraged me to utilize that right on a regular basis so that there would not be a question in the future. And so I just want to make sure that that gets addressed because it needs to get addressed. And then the 634. So at the board meeting last time, I opened the wrong document. So there's a summary of what happened at the other board meeting. I'll try and have that for you at the end. I do want to let folks know that the agenda item that we have tonight regarding our legislative update does not cover almost any of the legislative update. I have specifically requested that the item regarding the nuclear, regarding Diablo Canyon be the one that's discussed this evening. So if you have questions or comments on the other parts of the legislative update, either let me know or feel free to attend Wednesday's meeting because we are not discussing those things this evening. So just the update on Diablo Canyon. And I'm going to call that for my report tonight because it's already quite long. So are there any questions or comments on that before we go into the healthy communities discussion? Yeah, okay, great. Then I would like to invite, Nick said that he would be here to present this.
No, I'm filling in for Nick tonight on this topic, on this item.
Okay, thank you for being here, Alex.
Sure, thank you, Chair Eldred. Good evening, members of the committee, members of the public. Alex DeGiorgio, Public Engagement Manager. I should mention that this slide deck will be presented in more detail at the board meeting this week on Wednesday evening. So just be aware that these are going to be discussed there. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. And pardon me, I'm working from one screen as well. So a little bit of context here. As we internalize the feedback that we've gotten, particularly through public comment in our board discussions and the discussions with this committee, this partnership is evolving and going through iterations. You know, it's an iterative process. And where we are now, since the executive committee meeting where this was last discussed, is really trying to focus the partnership to help prove out the link between household electrification retrofits and the improvement of indoor air quality and the impact that has on households, particularly households that have a member of the household that suffers from asthma. So while we are all, I think, in agreement that natural gas is bad for air quality, we don't have studies available, at least that we've been able to find, and our staff has been coordinating with public healthcare providers and local nonprofit organizations such as Local Clean Energy Alliance to try to see if we can find any studies or pilot projects that can prove the link between electrification retrofits and improved indoor air quality and health outcomes thereto related. But we don't have those yet. So this partnership would be a good venue for developing those types of studies, particularly since the local developed business plan explicitly states that improving air quality is part of our mission. So that is the goal that we're reaching towards now, is to leverage the retrofits that we intend to provide and make available for our communities and customers, particularly those that have members of the household with asthma, pediatric asthma in particular, but not necessarily. We want to leverage the ratepayer dollars that we have to make those retrofits in such a way that we can help the public healthcare providers kind of match what we put in terms of funding the retrofits to fund and implement studies and pilot programs to help close that gap that we all suspect and assume is there between electrification retrofits. For example, replacing a stove that's currently running on natural gas with one that's an induction cooktop. We would like to work with public health care providers, and again, it could be Children's Hospital Oakland, it could be Kaiser, it could be a combination thereof, and others included. But we want to see if we, EBCE, helps implement the retrofit, can we test the air quality before and after and identify, number one, has there been an improvement to the indoor air quality? And then number two, if there's a member of the household who has asthma, has their condition improved? So that's kind of a synopsis of what this slide is saying. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So these are some of the partnership goals, as you can see here, to deliver 1,000 home electrification retrofits where, as I mentioned before, at least one resident suffers from asthma. And we want to be targeting, of course, the low income and frontline communities there. I think I've kind of covered some of these bullets already, but the goal here is that if we take a step back, if we're able to prove that link between electrification retrofits, which are I think something everyone agrees that we should be pursuing, particularly where it's needed most in frontline communities and in low-income households where someone's suffering from asthma. If we can show that there's a link there to improved air quality and therefore, and in addition to that, improved health outcomes in that home, that would allow our partners to be able to make the case that more funding should be directed to these types of retrofits, and more programs should be directed towards these types of efforts. And so potential partners, such as the ones I mentioned, Children's Hospital Oakland or Kaiser or whomever, they could leverage that kind of a program or that kind of a study to apply for more funding or provide more funding, whether it's from the federal or state governments, and perhaps match the ratepayer dollars that EBCE can bring to actually deliver those retrofits. Next slide, please. So as we've discussed, I think in the past, we're trying to do, especially with the feedback that we received from the board and from our allies and partners and advocates, is to align this with the scope and expertise that EBCE provides. We've gotten the feedback, we've heard loud and clear that there's some concern that if EBCE is funding pediatric asthma programs, directly and administering them through grants, or funding their administration through grants, that's going outside the scope of EBCE and our core competency, our core expertise that's more energy related. So the goal here is to align those two things. And as I said before, if we, at least in the current iteration, if we limit EBCE's ratepayer funding to delivering those retrofits to the homes that they're needed, which is our goal anyway, but we're able to collaborate and coordinate with public healthcare providers to study the impacts of those on air quality and health outcomes, that will then act as a justification for further retrofits of this kind, expanding that type of maybe a pilot program to be something more widespread and that can leverage dollars from both public and private entities. External funding partners, again, as we said, it could be the federal government, the US government, it could be other regional governments like the Air Resources Board. Sorry for all of these acronyms. I totally understand and agree that the acronyms can get exhausting, intimidating, and alienating. So I apologize for those, but US Health and Housing Services probably, and California Air Resources Board, those are some of those acronyms there. Again, these are just supposed to be examples of the types of entities that would probably be eager to help us achieve greater impact and greater penetration when it comes to electrifying homes and buildings. If there's a study out there that can prove that there is a relationship between the indoor air quality, the retrofit, and the health outcomes. Next slide, please. So again, these are all ideas. None of this is decided. This is all yet to be decided. So this slide is indicating what the partnership could look like. And so the first phase would be performing a study of the indoor air quality and the electrification programs. And if we can work with an outside organization that sees the value in something like this, we'd like to work with them to deploy air quality monitors, particularly in the homes of those with asthma patients. And I should tell you also that figuring out who those patients are and where they live would be in and of itself no small feat. I mean, that's something that the public healthcare providers have said that they are not currently resourced to do. So part of the goal here is if we can prove that connection between indoor air quality, the retrofit, and the health outcomes, that they'll be able to get the resources to help get more of the information that we need to achieve these goals. I think I'll move on for the sake of time. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So again, this is all kind of possibilities proposed. None of this has been decided, but you can see that like the starting with the indoor air quality research program, the monitoring project, the retrofit, the electrification grants. You can see where East Bay Community Energy and other partners would fall within those types of partnerships. So I hope this is fairly straightforward. But of course, I'm happy to take questions afterwards.
Just as a quick clarification on this side, have you identified a public health partner who is going to be funding and leading the efforts where they are listed as 1A, 1B, and 1D?
No, we have not identified them. That's to be identified. Potential entities could be such as Children's Hospital Oakland, as has been part of the discussion all along, or Kaiser, or others of that sort. But no, we have not.
And so the Building Decarb Coalition is an actual entity. Project Delivery Partner, has that been, or have the other partners been identified?
No, Chair Elder, not to my knowledge. This is still in its infancy, in the exploratory phases. So no, I don't think any particular parties or partners have been identified yet.
Does that include the funding partners?
Yes, I think that this is all, to my knowledge, at this point, this is all hypothetical. This is all at the exploratory phase. So with more feedback from the public and our board and the members of this committee, that those types of decisions are left to be made. But first, I think we need to decide whether just the parameters of this type of direction and this iteration of a partnership of this kind is going in the right direction and is more aligning the scope of EBCE as interpreted by yourselves and the board. If we're starting to get closer to kind of aligning the scope with the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that slide.
Sure.
Are there further slides or?
Let's see. I think this is the last slide. There might be one more. Look, I think this is giving more of a sense of the timeline. So again, going back to September's exec-com committee, and then it's going to be presented to our board. And then, these are the other steps that are left to be satisfied, is, assuming we continue to get feedback to go in this direction, to develop a more detailed proposal, and also to determine the funding levels. We don't know. I know that in the past, there had been the $15 million that had been part of the original proposal with the grant to Children's Hospital Oakland. Right now, we're not talking about any specific amount of money, although it could potentially be in that neighborhood, but that's still TBD. We're going back to the drawing board on this. And so in December, I think we'll look more at those types of details. Assuming we get, positive feedback and direction to continue in this direction between December and April, we'll begin the process of acquiring partners and developing the program along with those partners. And again, with EBCE, with us focused on installing the retrofits in the homes. That's the role that EBCE is intending to play. And hopefully our partners will see the value in that of conducting a study around the impacts of those retrofits, particularly where they're needed most. So by April, we'll seek approval for the Healthy Communities Partnership Agreements that we'll hopefully have by that time. And then we can launch the program in the spring of 2023 in May. So this is it. But again, this is all proposed. This is a lot of discussion yet to occur this evening and on a Wednesday evening at the board meeting and so forth.
And then last clarification, at what point in this timeline would you encumber the funds?
I don't know the answer to that. My guess is it would maybe be in the December timeline, because I mean, that's when we would recover the funds or identify what they would be.
Encumber. So to restrict the funds from use in other things until this Healthy Communities Partner thing happens.
My sense of that would be probably by the spring of next year.
Got it. Okay. So if members of this body have clarifying questions on the slides, then we'll do those first, and then we will do public comment, and then we will return to the CAC for discussion. So it would just be clarification and not discussion. And you can raise your hand in both sections, which is just fine. So we'll start with Member Souza.
Yes, hi. I love it. I think we had some problems with some money sent to a children's hospital. People had a little bit of an objection to that. And this is exactly, I think, would be the answer for this. Now, I guess my question is not necessarily clarifying, but
if it isn't clarifying, I would hold it to the next part of the discussion, because we are required to hear public comment before we have discussion. So you will be first, though.
Okay, I'll wait. Thank you.
Member Liu?
Yeah, Alex, thanks for the update and the presentation on this topic. I have some clarifying questions. I just want to clarify if I hear it correct. The funding level has not been determined yet. It's still to be defined.
That's correct.
Okay. How about the number of potential partners to be awarded?
I think that's TBD as well.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I will save my other question later.
Thank you. Member Hu?
Great. Thanks, Chair Eldred. Thanks, Alex, for this presentation. I think this is phenomenal. I'm so excited to hear about it. Two quick clarifying pieces. One, I wanted to note, in case helpful for others, HHS is actually Health and Human Services. So yeah, it's the other one. The housing is in a different bucket.
All right, thank you.
No, all good, but it's confusing because the feds do it different than California, because California is always a bit different. The clarifying question, I assume that it's not included, but I'm just curious, do you anticipate that activities like building envelope strengthening or like insulation would count under this bucket? Or do you think that's more like under the energy efficiency bucket instead of electrification? I was just curious where you're drawing the line.
That's a great question, Member Liu. I tend to think, to be honest, I'm not sure if that would qualify. I think that have to be determined. But my sense is that that would be more about energy efficiency and less about replacing something that's burning natural gas and has natural gas kind of exhausting into a living space or a workspace, and replacing that with something that doesn't involve any combustion at all. I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those types of retrofits. So that'll be like water heaters, HVAC, and stoves, pretty much.
Got it. So it's more about fuel switching activities, but yeah. Okay, great. I'll say my other questions. I
think that's the assumption, just since that, that the expectation is that those are what are causing a lot of the indoor air pollution. But I wouldn't want to limit it to that, or suggest that it would be limited to that. If a good case can be made that sealing the envelope improves the indoor air quality, that might be something we could explore as well.
I can probably provide you a whole litany of studies on that. It does.
Please do. We're looking for studies. Please do.
It does. Yes, that would be. I will work on that. Okay, so I would like to thank you for keeping your questions to clarifying questions. I would like to turn to public comments. Adrian, were there any? Well, there wouldn't probably have been any written correspondence received as the information was posted at a later date and not with the utmost of clarity, but thank you so much for getting it up there. But I do see 3 members of the public with their hands raised.
Yes, I also see Member Souza has her hand
yes.
raised.
And Member Souza is going to be the first person for when we go back to discussion, but we need to take comment first.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Jessica Tovar, Alita Dupree, and Tom Kelly have their hands raised. Jessica Tovar, recognize you for 3 minutes.
Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Well, first I want to acknowledge, I do see that there's been response in changing the original proposal, and I appreciate that there is some listening to, the members of the public, and really the enforcement of East Bay Community Energy focusing on its, what is in its purview around energy. And so I wanted to make a couple comments, and I do know I do intend to also share more studies. We probably are going to have a pretty long list, I think, by the end of it. But I do feel like this has been studied to death, and we actually do need action in terms of doing the fuel switching with appliances, and not just the stove, but home heating, as well as heating of water. And then, the other aspects that have been brought up around energy efficiency certainly all are very helpful. One thing I want to highlight, though, also is that in a lot of the studies, it's the accumulation of also pollution from the outside of the home that concentrates in the home, in addition to the stuff that we're exposed to within our home from either the appliances or products that we use. And I know this because I participated in an NIEHS study with several partners and several universities, and it is a published study. But I also want to add that, it is important for us to see where the money is coming from, where it's going, actually seeing a budget on this proposal. And it's also important for us to just get continued more public input to make this, as strong as possible in terms of a program. Gosh, there's so many other things. I felt like one of the things that I really emphasized last month too was, if you really want to do research, what hasn't been studied is how to do these retrofits and make sure that people's rents are not jacked up and that they are displaced from their homes. I feel like that's a huge question mark right now, and specifically in the Bay Area that has been experiencing hypergentrification for a long time. And I have so much more to say, but I realize I'm running out of time. We will be working on an extensive written response to this. So I really hope that you all look out for that and read that. But yeah, at this point, we still have a lot more questions on this proposal. Scientific studies require a controlled study, and I don't see anything like this in the proposal. So I'll stop.
Thank you. Alita Dupree, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thanks again, Chair Anna Olivia. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. I speak of the basics and from the heart. And these are very important personal issues. I fortunately live in an all-electric home. There's no natural gas service in here whatsoever. And except for a 2-year period back in the 90s, I've been living in all electric homes since 1990. So I have 30 years of experience with this. And I was just thinking about a friend of mine, a very good friend that I have known since 1995. And she has a lot of health issues, including some pulmonary issues. And it really hit me as we were talking about this tonight that she lives in an apartment that is really all the heavy heating loads are all natural gas. The stove, range, the hot water, the space heating. And I wonder to myself, how much is this having an effect on her, given her advanced, very difficult, challenging health conditions? And we don't ever really hear about that in these very personal ways. And I worked in restaurants for a bit in my younger days. And those restaurants all had natural gas. And I wonder, what is the chemical equivalent, the cigarette equivalent of breathing in those emissions, whether they be in your home or in a commercial establishment, such as a restaurant. And I worked at 2 airports years ago, and I'm sure breathed in a lot of air that came from those operating aircraft engines. I think this work is reasonably in the purview of EBCE. It's something really all electric utilities should be doing, because this isn't just about proving the value of electricity, but giving people the information that they need to make informed choices. And I think that I have benefited from living in all electric homes. And certainly if I have to go look for another apartment, I would hope that I would be able to find an all electric apartment that fits my budget. And thank you for this work. I look forward to it continuing and getting things done.
Thank you. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. First, let me just second Jessica's comments about appreciating the fact that we've moved on from this $15 million sole source gift to Children's Hospital, and we're actually coming up with something that's much more aligned with EBCE's mission. But I do have a couple of things I'd like to share, and that is that, first of all, an organization here in Alameda County, BayREN, well, this actually represents all the 9 Bay Area counties, is already got huge investment in electrification. They're doing rebates on hot water heaters, induction ranges, gas furnaces. And I could actually see where EBCE could actually be a funder of some of that effort that's ongoing with BayREN, rather than starting from scratch on something entirely new. And if you really want to make it a study, then these health organizations that Alex has mentioned could certainly work with BayREN to see if there's any impact from the electrification. But the other thing I want to say is that, obviously there are many details to work out on this, but any researcher worth his or her salt is not going to it's not going to be confident that they're going to be able to show any real positive outcomes when a program is spread out over, say, Alameda County, rather than it being concentrated in one or two census tracts where there are low-income people and also people who suffer from respiratory illness. If you spread it out over the whole county, you're just going to get anecdotal evidence, and that's not really going to sell a funder on providing, more money for you. I think that's basically it. I'm interested to see where else this might, how this might evolve. But, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we won't see a replay of what we saw over the last few months with the Children's Hospital fiasco. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment.
Mute buttons. Thank you to the public, and thank you for that report. It's really great, Alex. So now we go to the conversation portion. And for folks who asked their clarifying questions, if you had further questions, please feel free to raise your hands. Member Souza, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm very excited about this. First of all, this is kind of what I do in homes. I go to people's homes and I look for efficiency, but also air quality. So I do what's called a BPI, Building Performance Institute, checks on combustion safety. And I have run into many problems with fossil fuels, with natural gas. Everything from, high carbon monoxide coming out of a stove, which is more frequent than you would imagine, to spillage, which is the gases of the water heater, for instance, pouring back into the house. Wall furnaces are also very dangerous. The thing is when you're testing these, there's a method to it, and certainly I would like to offer my help with understanding how to check the carbon monoxide issues in a particular home. That's what I am. I'm an expert in carbon with combustion safety, and the other thing is I also do electrification in homes. I want to be very careful when people move to electrification and not going to a resistance type heater. Rather, they're moving to something like a heat pump, which would be probably cheaper in the long run than a high efficiency gas furnace. Whereas a electric resistance, we have to pay very good attention to that. It would cost them double or triple to heat their home. So we want to make sure the type of electric that we're moving to is paid attention to. And I think Tom mentioned that there's BayREN. I work with BayREN all the time. I can hook you up, so to speak, with contacts on what the rebate program is all about. Other programs have latched on to BayREN because BayREN does what's called a test out, and the test out involves a combustion safety test. It also checks to see that the equipment is installed properly. So there's a bunch of checks on the back end, which would preclude East Bay Clean Energy from having to do that sort of thing. They can hook onto that. So those are things that I just want to offer how to help with this. So Alex, you have my number, I'm very happy to help, or even do a presentation on this if you'd like. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Member Lutz?
Let me get my unmute button. I had a couple questions. One, I certainly hope that this uncertainty about a healthy electrification program does not in any way delay the rolling out of the current LMI program. And in fact, that led me to the thought of, well, what's the status, the current status of the LMI project, the LMI electrification that the board approved, what, 3 meetings ago now? So that's my concern is, you know, all this excitement about doing a research project on indoor air quality. I want to make absolutely certain that it does not delay the current LMI electrification efforts. And then I wanted to also amplify Jessica's concern about doing retrofits without displacement. And one of the concerns I'd raised early on about the LMI electrification program, and they apply just as much to the healthy e-health electrification program we're discussing here, is how do you get renters enrolled and how do you make sure that they get the benefits and are not adversely affected by the improved quality of the house they don't own. So those were my concerns at this point. And that's it.
Thank you, Member Lutz. Member Hu?
Yes, great, thanks. I had a few questions. One, I'm curious how and why BDC, the Building Decarb Coalition, is the only confirmed partner on that beautiful table offered so far. I'm just curious if that means that BDC's been helping shape the process or the proposal, or just any information you're able to share about that relationship would be really helpful for me. Secondly, I'm really curious if other CCAs are also interested in potentially funding or exploring this relationship. The reason I'm asking is because I think there might actually be some state funds or other programs. I know folks mentioned BayREN. I think CDPH, the California Department of Public Health, might also have some funds or a new program trying to do similar work. So I'm just curious if staff have been able to, explore or see if there are other similar opportunities. I think that's echoing a comment that came from others in terms of, is there a way to stack? Is there a way to have bigger or more concentrated impact on specific households in EBCE territory? That would be great. And then my last comment, I just, again, want to amplify, what we heard in public comment, and also, putting on my advocate hat for a moment. I'm formerly Energy Equity Program Manager at the Green Lining Institute. I was one of the co-authors of the Equitable Building Electrification Framework. And there we really, really did stress the importance of ensuring that energy retrofits and upgrades, which can and should include energy efficiency upgrades in addition to electrification, must not displace residents, especially renters, especially our most vulnerable community members. So if there is, flexibility and interest in figuring out, what are the different mechanisms to really ensure that that happens to support a comprehensive approach, which seems to be the intent by wrapping up health with energy in the first place, I would really support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Hu. Member Liu?
Hey, Alex, again, great presentation and good to know some update on this very hot topic. I feel that it's great to see that we developed a guideline and work on this area and make some progress. And sorry for the background noise. One question I have is, it seems to me we picked the area and we want to focus this partnership potential opportunity on health-related issue. And as a PhD in electrical engineering, and myself worked on many different electrical focused research and programs. I'm curious why don't we broaden the scope? I think there are many opportunities we can consider to partner with different partners to improve energy efficiency, to improve renewable, to make a more innovative approach and to improve the overall program. And just curious why we focus on the health related. I know that's a very significant part for sure. So these are that is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Liu. Are there other questions from here? If not, then I will ask my Member Landry.
Yes, I see some movement on this. And what I wanted to ask you, Alex, I see in the timeline, September 2022, it's going to go to the executive committee. And then in October to the full board. Will it come back to the CAC, or I would presume it would come back to the CAC prior to going to the full board in, well, actually, maybe I'm reading this wrong. Maybe this is what we're doing tonight. I'm reading the dates wrong. Am I reading the dates wrong, Anna Olivia?
Yes, you are. Okay. So it went to the exec committee. There was substantial modifications to the original proposal after staff heard feedback and direction from exec and the public. So now it's going to us, it's going to the board on Wednesday as an informational item as part of the chair's report, which is why it wasn't on the agenda, or it would have been on our regular agenda. And then there will be getting some feedback and direction again, and then incorporating that into a proposal that'll come back in December. If I was reading, is that right, Alex?
Yes, that's what it looks like to me too.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of that process. So yes, this is something that has quite a lot of public engagement involved, both during these meetings and outside of these meetings. So yes, this is something that we will continue to hear.
Yes, so I guess what I meant to say, I presume it would come back in December rather to the CAC for another look at it prior to being heard or voted on in December. Okay.
Great. So Alex, do you want to respond to those before I ask mine? Go for it. No, you're muted again.
You know, I was actually gonna say I'm getting a little concerned for folks that are waiting on some of the other items. I'd be happy to follow up on all these questions, but perhaps in writing.
Great. Yeah, well, we're working on it. This was not on the agenda. I could have selected a different agenda had it been there. So we're going to do the best that we can. This is a big deal, and it's been a big deal for a minute. So I'll just throw mine in there too. Just as note, following up on some of the comments that were made earlier, I'd also really like to see something in here that looks at minimum efficiency standards for heat pumps and other electrification equipment. Some of the refrigerants that are used in heat pumps are hundreds of times more harmful than carbon dioxide, and the standard one that's being utilized right now is actually not very good, and there are some really great ones, but I would just like to see some efficiency minimums put into our proposals. I'd also like to advocate that when you bring the plan forward, it involves the request for proposals going through the board and the CAC. I mean, there's some really obvious choices like Bay Run and Stop Waste, and there's some really obvious partnerships there. But it would be great if there were not like predetermined who our partners were going to be, but like that the wealth of knowledge and expertise and experience that staff has cleverly recruited onto the CAC and representation from our board go and look at those, at who those partners would be. And really looking at ways to address some of the other things that have come up, like when we look at, these are things that really need to happen for disadvantaged communities. And there are many of our member cities that, and unincorporated areas that might not fall inside of a technical disadvantaged community, but are still low income and are in heavy pollution corridors and are still the recipients of all of this pollution that's happening and are still vulnerable. So looking at a way to address those things for a good geographic representation would be a nice thing to see in the proposal. And another tool, I was part of the group that wrote the City of Oakland Equitable Climate Action Plan, and there was a whole set on building electrification, and some really good work came out of that around equity and existing housing stock and those kinds of things. And so there's quite a lot of studies and research that we were looking at, including one of the big studies looking at the effects of health and electrification, and their model was an Oakland house. So we just got really lucky that it happened to be an Oakland house. So it's really expensive. Electrification is really expensive. And when you start looking at things like our housing stock and how that really plays out in Alameda County, it gets even more complicated. So there's a lot of resources. We encourage you to do them. Thank you so much for the really clear response to concerns and feedback. You can definitely get back to folks in writing that we would appreciate that. If you want to do a quick, like high level, like I hear you, or some general responses, that's fine, but things that you want to respond to in writing, we will look forward to receiving that and having that posted on the website for everyone as well. Because I hear you on the timing thing right now.
Okay. I don't know about posting on the website, but we will certainly respond.
Okay. Well, if information is disseminated, we're supposed to also make it available to the public, right? That's the problem.
Oh yeah, like part of meeting minutes or something like that.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That would be a great place for it. So, all right, Cynthia, is your hand still up? Or is it up again? Member Landry? I'm going to assume that your hand is still up and not new. Okay, so it's really great that you appear to be shifting our funds into action. It's really good. So I'm going to call that item, and we're going to go to the next agenda item. Holy cow. The update on the integrated resource planning analysis. This is an action item. It is being presented by, is it being presented by Doug Murray?
Doug and Marie.
Doug and Marie, there you go.
We are now entering the lightning round portion of this meeting, as I have a conflict at 8 o'clock. Okay, great. Adrian, will you move forward to the next slide, please? Doug and I will be presenting to EBCE's board on Wednesday the results of our every other year, our biennial CPUC mandated integrated resource planning analysis. And it is a compliance analysis, something that we have to do and we have to file with the CPUC every other year. The due date this year is November 1st, and we are required to get the board's approval of the filing before we make it. Next slide, please. There are 3 specific documents that have to be submitted to the CPUC. One of them is a narrative. We have to follow a specific template. We also have to submit something called the resource data template, which is a huge Excel workbook that describes the resources in our hypothetical portfolio. And then the clean system power calculator, which is used to calculate emissions on a forward-looking basis from that portfolio of hypothetical resources. It's also valuable to EBCE. I keep saying hypothetical portfolio, and you'll hear me say that a lot during this. That's because while some resources are in the portfolio are from contracts we have actually executed, we look at what resources we might sign contracts for. And so looking at what resources we might sign contracts for gives us information about the value of these resources and when we might have needs for other types of resources and other risks that could arise associated with such a hypothetical portfolio. Next slide, please. Starting with the takeaways first, what did we learn doing this analysis? Well, number one, our hypothetical portfolio resulted in some specific hours where we were exposed or we didn't have energy coming from our contracted resources to cover our demand in the CAISO market. So it exposed us in certain hours. And then there's also the benefit of being able to stress test our hypothetical selection of resources. Some of the limitations, this is a modeling exercise. What your assumptions are going into the modeling exercise determines what the outcomes are. And specifically, one of the most notable, for lack of a better term, weakest, if you will, assumptions are those related to the cost of resources in the portfolio. We use the same cost assumptions for wind resources, solar, geothermal, et cetera, energy storage. We use the assumptions from the CPUC, and they are from an NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory data set that was published in 2020. That data set is, just by the nature of it, it's going to be outdated, but it really doesn't reflect what we are seeing in the marketplace today. And just, as like a high level estimate, the costs that we are using to estimate and make up a hypothetical portfolio, they're between like 25 and 50% below the costs of resources we see in the marketplace today. So good way to think about what we might want to contract with, but definitely not a crystal ball that is going to predict what we will actually contract with, because it's divorced from the reality of what is actually available and the costs in real time. Another limitation, the CPUC model, this CPUC modeling approach requires us to incorporate emissions in our portfolio associated with certain types of resources. They're called combined heat and power resources, and they are behind the meter. So when we're going to have emissions from resources that aren't really technically in our portfolio, there will always be emissions in what we report. And then lastly, the way that we count emissions in the IRP process is not the same as the way that we actually count emissions for the power source disclosure report and what we do at the end of the year based on energy that was actually generated and demand that actually realized. Next slide, please. Some interesting things about the hypothetical portfolio. When it comes to energy storage, a 4-hour duration battery is the standard. 8 hours is considered long duration, 8 hours or more. And our model noteworthy. Interestingly, it indicated that we should contract for 6-hour storage in the outer years. That's largely an artifact of, the forecast costs of and the assumptions related to costs of that. It's also noteworthy that this portfolio includes a significant amount of offshore wind in the outer years in like the 2030 to 2035 timeframe. And there's just a lot of risk and uncertainty. Maybe it'll be available, maybe it'll be at a cost that we would want to contract for, but we're a long way from long offshore wind off the coast of California being a real thing. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. And again, this IRP analysis is not a crystal ball. It's more of like a sketch of what our portfolio could look like in the future. Next slide. What are the next steps? Well, we have to get board approval and then complete the filing by November 1st to meet our CPUC compliance obligations. Then we want to actually rerun this analysis, including Stockton. We had to start this exercise before Stockton was going to definitely join EBCE. The resource adequacy or the capacity rules and that whole compliance workspace is being completely redesigned starting in 2024. So we'd like to, and the redesign has not been finalized yet. So we'd like to do some additional IRP studying, looking at how things look based on the new resource adequacy rules that have not been finalized yet. And we also plan to establish an ongoing internal study process. So it won't be us coming and talking to the board every 2 years about an IRP and having to remind everyone what it is. We'd like it to turn into more of an ongoing conversation and talking about how the IRP study process can inform, though not necessarily direct, the procurement that the Power Resources team does. Next slide, please. Okay, over to you, Doug.
Okay, I'll try to go through these quickly. So one of the key features of the IRP in this cycle, a lot of the analysis that we do is kind of constrained by the requirements placed on us by the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission. That includes, and as Marie kind of alluded to, they determine the load forecast that we have to use. We do not get to kind of change that. We can't say, oh, actually, we think there's going to be more electric vehicles. We are required to submit a filing that has their load forecast in it. So what that has for us in 2035 is 7.5 terawatt hours. That does not include Stockton, which is, based on the latest numbers, like another terawatt hour, a little more. And so that load then ends up determining through our share of the 2035 load, both in the IOU territory and across the state, what the CPUC requires us to meet as an emissions cap in both the 30 MMT scenario, which is statewide emissions of 30 MMT by 2035, and the 25 MMT scenario. So we can see, based on the numbers that they used in this IRP, EBCE makes up about 25% of PG&E's bundled load. And you can see that our associated emissions caps are about 25% of PG&E's too. The important thing to remember here is these are emissions caps. We don't have to hit that, we just have to be below it. So we have to meet the load that the CPUC sets out, and we have to do so in a way that, according to their modeling, the worksheet that they provide that calculates your emissions, we have to be below that 0.779 or 0.623 MMT number. And that includes, as Marie mentioned, that includes some emissions that we can't even control from the CHP. Next slide, please, Adrian. Real briefly, I'll go through this. We talked about this pretty extensively last month. The approach to modeling really consists of 3 steps. Step 1, the capacity expansion modeling that sets the statewide energy environment for the future. So across the whole state, what do we need to add to make sure that we can keep the lights on going forward? Step 2 takes that statewide build and says, okay, given the changes that we're seeing in terms of production profiles and kind of net load that you see during the day, what price patterns are we going to see on the system? And you know, I say net load because really the big issue here is 10 years ago, middle of the day, kind of late afternoon, you would see the highest power prices when load was really high and natural gas resources were being dispatched to meet that load. We're moving into a scenario where middle of the day is when the prices are going to be lowest because there's so much solar across the state trying to feed into the system. And so we need to make sure that the plan that we're making is both good for us with the price profiles we see now and good for us in a future where the price profiles have kind of flipped. So then, using the prices produced by the production cost modeling, we optimize our local portfolio, which says, given what we think about load, the prices of different resources, the price of power in the market, the goals and aims of our company and the board, what is the optimal set of resources that we should get to serve all of our load? And I want to spend just a short second. When I say optimal, I really do mean that the model goes through and finds the lowest cost solution it can. And that's kind of a key failure of some of these models is we do not have perfect information going forward. We don't have perfect information about the prices throughout the rest of the horizon. So we do an optimization to say, given these assumptions, what's the optimal portfolio? But it really makes it very important that we get those assumptions right and we define those things around which the model is optimizing correctly. Next slide, please, Adrian. So what we did is we developed a single preferred conforming portfolio that takes what the CPUC put out as their preferred system plan and uses that as kind of, again, this statewide energy environment that we will be operating in. But then we did our own analysis within that context to develop our integrated resource plan. So the benefits, we used a slightly different model than the CPUC, but we spent a lot of time benchmarking it, and you know, it was actually developed by one of the same developers who made the CPUC model. So it conforms with the CPUC requirements. The assumptions for kind of resource costs, the development of the network over the next number of years are very closely tied to the current state of CPUC expectations of resource availability and cost. And then once we started doing our kind of local portfolio modeling, we were able to incorporate our views of what resources we wanted and how well they fit within our portfolio. On the flip side, there are some limitations. As Marie mentioned, there is different accounting methods between not only PSDR and the Clean System Power Tool, which is what the CPUC uses, but there's also different accounting and kind of different underlying calculations between the model that we use and the CSP tool that tells us our emissions according to the state that kind of arise from just different assumptions. It's not really that one is right or one is wrong. It's they take a different view of curtailment in the market going forward and lead to slightly different answers. So there's some inconsistency between the numbers coming out of these different models. And then as Marie mentioned, the resource costs from NREL do not seem to be kind of consistent with what we've seen in the actual market lately. And then finally, you can see over the next number of years that, you know, our share of CalISO is expected to grow, and this is even before we get Stockton in the mix. Next slide, Adrian, I'll pass it back to Marie.
In this, on the next two slides, we're showing you basically just different views of the same information. And this is the most detailed. This slide shows on the left the resources that we have actually contracted with. These things are real. We expect these projects to come online and start delivering energy and related attributes to meet our customers' needs. On the right is the hypothetical list of resources that that the IRP model indicates would be valuable to us in coming years. Next slide, please. This is, as I said, the same information, but expressed graphically and by type of resource and based on the nameplate capacity of the resource. Next slide, please. This is the exact same information as the previous slide, but not expressed as a graph, but it now expressed as a table so you can see numbers. Next slide.
I think this is back to me. So this takes, really high level look at the annual production from our different resource options as we go into the future. And really the key thing to see here is this highlights the difference between, the definition of renewable portfolio standard that is pretty common in California over the last decade or two, that says the renewable portfolio standard percent is defined as the amount of renewable generation divided by retail sales. And you can see that that's the guideline we used for modeling this. In 2030, we hit 100% RPS. And that doesn't include behind the meter PV because that's, again, behind the meter. And it allows us to, because we're doing an annual accounting, use the market for kind of balancing and shaping these renewable resources. Next slide, please, Adrian. This slide shows you, and this is, as Marie mentioned, we're using forecasted costs, we're using modeled energy prices. So really what we're showing here is this portfolio does not represent kind of a massive spike in our annual cost of procuring electricity. It appears based on current price projections that we should be able to keep our costs at roughly the same level over the next 10 to 15 years, assuming these prices are all accurate, which I think really just speaks to we should be able to keep our value proposition in place. And this is an interesting question for us to ask because currently our rates are set as a discount off of PG&E, but as we move to more of a cost of service-based structure, we expect that we will be able to pass cost savings directly through to customers through this rate design. Next slide, please, Adrian. So this slide just shows that in our single portfolio that we developed, we are compliant with the CPUC's requirement that we buy enough capacity to really make sure that there is resource adequacy on the system going forward. And what we did to make sure that we did that, instead of doing a separate portfolio for the 30 and 25 cases, we looked at, let's make sure that regardless of whatever future we end up in, we're making decisions right now that put us on the path to meet our requirements from the CPUC in either situation. So you can see we took the max of the marginal resource need in each case, and we're planning to be ready to go towards either of those futures as they arise. Next slide, Adrian. So I'm going to talk real briefly about, what Marie mentioned earlier. We have, because of the way that the 100% GHG free metric was defined, there is a little bit of room for us to make market purchases. And one thing that we saw was, I was a little surprised by this actually, was we were not buying so much solar that we were going to be dumping a lot of energy, really long on our position in the summer months. We were buying enough solar, you can see this in the bottom graph here, that we, in the middle of the day in July, we're getting most of our energy from solar, but we're still relying on some market purchases in the evenings and overnight. And that's really arising because instead of going longer and making sure that we're not short during July 2030, we wanted to make sure that we were not over procured for some weeks in April. And if we go to the next slide, Adrian, I think you can kind of understand why that is. So this slide on the top, you see how many megawatts we purchase in the market. You have months on the left and then hour of the day across the top. So you see in most of the year, we're going out and purchasing a little bit from the market, but during March, April, May, June, during the kind of beginning of the day, we're selling, or we have more resource than we need to satisfy our load. And what happens when we do that, those times are actually the worst times for the portfolio to be long. That's lowest prices. And so really the model, and this is an optimization kind of influence, the model is really reluctant to say, build more to meet load throughout the rest of the year if it means we're longer in our position during those few months. Next slide, please, Adrian.
So a few minutes ago, I and Doug mentioned the power source disclosure report. The power source disclosure report is where and it is where we report our annual emissions, albeit after the end of the year. So we've reported our 2021 emissions. Those were reported in July of 2022. There are very specific rules about what we report and how we have to report it. That is the requirement. Those are the requirements for how we report actual emissions on a yearly basis. And when we think about what our emissions are in the power source disclosure report, we are reporting emissions based on our retail demand. What is required for the IRP, we can actually go forward to the next slide. What is required for the IRP is that we use the Clean System Power tool, and that looks at our emissions based on wholesale demand. So it's like, retail plus a bit, which all of, I'm making a big point of and emphasizing this because with the Clean System Power tool, we also use a different calculation methodology. So the math that goes into it is different into, what the emissions numbers are in the numerator, and then the denominator, the divisor in this calculation. With the power source disclosure report, it's one number, and with the Clean System Power tool, it's a different number. Actually, I have that backwards. It would be the numerator, excuse me. But the analogy stands. The point that I really want to drive home is that there is a mismatch between how we actually account for our emissions at the end of the year and how the IRP analysis looks at emissions going forward, and it is looking at it based on two different sets of numbers. Next slide, please. In the table in the top left shows that we are meeting our renewable portfolio standard compliance obligations, both the percent obligation for the total percentage of renewable energy in our portfolio going out to 2030. We're exceeding it with the hypothetical proposed portfolio, and there's also a sub-requirement that we have enough long-term contracts that contribute to our renewable energy, and we are able to achieve that with this hypothetical portfolio as well. Next slide, please. Now, this is where we get down to brass tacks, and it's also the last slide in the deck. So in the 30 million metric ton scenario, our limit for wholesale emissions is 0.779 million metric tons. That includes, this is why we did the yellow highlighting, that includes 0.09, basically 0.1 million metric tons from combined heat and power resources, these things we have no control over, and then 0.5 million metric tons from system power purchases. That brings us in at a total of 0.6 million metric tons for our wholesale emissions. That is below the wholesale limit of 0.79, and it is also below the wholesale limit of 0.623 associated with the statewide lower target for emissions. And on the bottom graph, actually, Doug, would you mind speaking to the bottom graph for me?
Yeah, the bottom graph just shows, again, it kind of gets at this accounting difference between the CSP and the model that we used to run the analysis. In the model that we ran, we had 100% GHG free percentage, that kind of bottom line. When we put those same resources into the CSP, the Clean System Power tool, put out by the California Public Utilities Commission, we end up at a slightly lower number, 89 in 2030, where we had 195 in 2035. That is due to some difference in assumptions about curtailment, but it kind of gets at this idea that these numbers in a forecasting sense are really driven by a lot of the assumptions. And so we ran a case that had 100%. When we put it through the CSP, it had a little different assumptions, and we came out at 90% in 2030 and 95 in 2035.
Okay, and that is the overview of the results of the IRP compliance analysis that will be filed on November 1st.
Awesome. That was a lot. And well done. Happy rapid fire round. And I know that you're doing the next presentation as well. It's going to be hard to figure out where to ask these questions. I do see a member of the public with their hand raised. So Alida, we're going to call on you for 2 minutes. Because this is the same team that is presenting a related item immediately following this. I do have some questions on it, but go for it, Alida.
I can hold off until we take public comment on both of these items.
Can I just the next item is related to contracts. It's not really related. Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll take my 2 minutes now on this item. Thank you, Chair and Olivia. Alida Dupree for the record, she and her. This is heavy, and well, it's important, and it's heavy in a good way. I can't speak to be an expert on this technical material, but I do see some very important themes here. Storage is absolutely essential. And how can we take advantage of getting the abundant, very low cost, and sometimes negatively priced electricity in the midday of the shoulder months into our EBCE territory? Because a lot of the solar is in the Central Valley. And there are, unfortunately, some capacity constraints in transmission. And so ultimately, the key is not just about being able to balance the numbers, but to be able to get the electrons shipped into our territory to be used and also to be stored. And so what does that mean? How do we overcome that? Or are we going to have to store electricity during the day and store it again at night? I think storage is a workable and legitimate method to manage, to procure and manage our electricity. And I want to see more of it. And hopefully as much of this storage as we can get can be local, because really this is about resilience. And with storage, it will help to complement the demand response and hopefully reduce the need for rolling blackouts. Thank you.
Thank you, Alida. Is there any other public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will go to questions from this committee. Member Lutz.
Yeah, a couple questions. This, what is the accounting for rooftop solar within EBCE territory? That's sort of a specific question or a detailed type of question. Of a much broader one is there were lots of tactfully muted criticisms of the CPUC modeling from both Doug and Marie that I wondered if at some point they could point out, and at some point when EBCE's political and market muscle gets big enough, that we could start fixing those shortcomings of the PUC modeling and the forecasting and try to do things that work better for EBCE in, all sorts of ways that are probably also more accurate in forecasts. So it's sort of an obvious one that Alita talked about is storage. So if we get lots of good storage, if you get your customers putting in lots of storage and solar in EBCE territory, you should be able to get credit for it, and you should actually be helping our customers with that. How does that get modeled into this? What sort of changes need to be done to the PUC modeling? And what's the best way for EBCE to flex its political and market muscle to start making those changes happen? So just sort of longer term questions, it sounds like you're very explicitly constrained, but I wanted to, there are, looking forward, what are the best ways to go?
Marie, Doug, do you want to be responding to people, or do you want to take things and try and submit things?
Why don't we go through all of the questions, and we can decide at the end if it makes sense to provide responses to them right now or provide a written response at a later time.
All right. Member Landry?
No, I'm lowering my hand. Thank you.
Okay. I have some questions and I'm not sure where this falls into, so I will do my best here. Hold on, I'm having a little the computer is doing something very bizarre right then. So according to apologies. So I'm like, I have some kind of practical questions on this about how it applies to our CCA. And like, when we look at our resource planning and in the context of our history, like Tom sent out this thing that was doing a comparison of our energy and power mix and PG&Es, and we've heard in the past about how the Padilla report is lagging and stuff. So I spent a good amount of time pulling up the first 2 quarters of this year and looking at those reports and pulling up our meeting minutes and the reports that have been presented by staff. And I'm curious about some of these things. One of them is like, we got rid of a product, right? We got rid of Brilliant 100. Those customers were split between, some of them went to Renewable 100 and some of them went to Bright Choice, depending on the community and the individual. But our power content very clearly states that we are purchasing solar and wind for Renewable 100, period. So that load is not being expected to be served by the hydro resources that were making up quite a lot of the Brilliant 100. And I'm wondering about where that is going, like whether we are just giving up those resources or if we're keeping those. That might be part of the contracts. Really, some of these got mixed up in my head, like when I was looking at these 2 items together. So if it makes more sense to address that in the next one, that's fair. It's sad that Tom is not here, because I really read his report and then went and looked up all the numbers around it. And while PG&E does have more carbon-free energy without counting nuclear, we actually have more carbon-free energy. But the renewables question is a different one. And we appear to be about a year behind PG&E, both in reporting and in our staff projections. We plan on remaining a year behind PG&E in our energy procurement. And in our planning, it looks like we're planning to stay that way. So I'm curious about that. I mean, it had, like I have all the numbers here. I'm sure you know what they are, so I don't need to go into that right at the second, but it seems like maybe we shouldn't plan on being a year behind PG&E consistently in renewables. And as you know, some of our load has gone over to be served entirely by solar and wind, which we know and understand means that it's not actually being served by renewable resources, just the equivalent of that electricity is being purchased. I'm much more concerned about the Bright Choice product. And the Bright Choice product is the one that is required to be a cost savings. And so if we look at our commitment to low carbon emission energy that's inexpensive and our trajectory to get to our renewable goals, it seems like we should at least be planning on keeping up with PG&E on renewables, which right now our planning appears like we will keep a year behind them at a minimum, which maybe not on the long run, but on the current run is our printed numbers. And really, I'm just curious about how this is doing it, because right now we've got this slight advantage on PG&E with the carbon free, but no real advantage. Like it's like we don't have a competitive advantage with PG&E when it comes to RPS qualified renewables. And so we aren't less expensive on those. We're more expensive on them. We have less in our mix. And we also have this really messy 40% of unspecified, right? Because it doesn't matter what that really is. It looks messy to the public and to lots of folks. And so I'm just curious about how we address that, whether, you know, these contracts that existed for the Brilliant 100 product, whether that's something that can be brought over, and if there is a more aggressive timeline that we can look at for our resource planning that puts us at least at a higher mix, which would then make up for us costing more for the renewable product. And that's kind of as fast as I could summarize that. And I do understand the difference between whether you're doing something as a percentage of retail sales or wholesale procurement. Like it's a difference of between 7 to 8% on average between the years. So that is a significant number. And I do understand those things. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think that is a bit that's mixed on a lot of people, but that means retail sales, we're actually getting to, we get a little bit of a bonus because we don't have to count some of that stuff. And I just would love to understand that bit of it a little bit better.
I have noted down the questions that were asked, and we will have to provide a written response that can be posted with the meeting minutes. With one exception, I don't really want to put in the meeting minutes Mr. Lutz's comment about us being critical of the CPUC. So I will just speak to that one right now. We actually don't mean to be critical of the CPUC's modeling and their process. This is a good process to study something that is very difficult and to get a lot of different stakeholders doing long-term planning and trying to work together. So the CPUC, the process, this is the third time they've done it and it's getting better every time. I expect that the next one will be even better. But the nature of doing a big statewide analysis and wanting everyone's analyses to fit together into one big puzzle has some limitations. So the CPUC is doing a good job, but there will not be perfect data sets. There will not be perfect inputs, and it actually is a valuable exercise.
I may have misspoken there. I apologize, but it seemed like you had definite ideas of improvements that could be made, and it might be good to think about what improvements should be EBCE could push for, and for statewide benefit actually too. So
that makes sense. Thank you.
I didn't mean to say that you were, I don't mean to get you in trouble.
That's okay. We're not, it's okay. We're not.
All right. So I really do look forward to those. Do you have an idea of when we might see them?
I'm going to try, I will have to confer with Adrian about what the process is to respond, but I would really like to provide a response before the board meeting on Wednesday night. So
that would be really helpful.
Yeah, that would be the goal.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. And so with that, we will move into the next agenda item, recognizing your time constraints, and look at long-term energy and resource adequacy contracts, which is also an action item. I'm going to hold action on the last, like it is an action item. I would like to hear this presentation so that any motions or whatever that we do happen in recognition of Marie's scheduling conflict, if that is okay with our board clerk.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Good. So, great.
Just to be clear, the action item on the first one, well, at least for the board, is to approve us completing our compliance filing. There is no procurement or there's no financial impact associated with the IRP analysis. We're trying to ensure compliance.
We have to turn in a report, but we can, because that requires a motion and a second and a roll call vote, we figured we'd just go straight into your next presentation and then we can look at that after.
Great, thank you. Adrian, will you load the next slides? Thank you very much. Okay, this is related to the IRP in a way. Will you go forward to the next slide, please, Adrian? Next slide. EBCE partnered with San Jose Clean Energy and released our 2022 long-term resource RFO in February of 2022. EBCE and San Jose we're partnering through the entire process. So we're negotiating contracts together. We are using the same attorneys. We're actually sharing costs by having both of us negotiating for the same contracts, or taking turns. There's efficiency in this, and we're sharing the costs of some of the quantitative analysis tools that we're using. We're sharing, dividing our legal costs by 2. So we're actually by partnering with San Jose, both organizations are saving money. A big part of the reason that we are doing this procurement is because after I mentioned a minute ago that this is the third, that the IRP analysis that we're about to file on November 1st is the third time that we are filing an IRP analysis. We did one in 2018, we did one in 2020. Well, in 2019, there was a procurement mandate from the CPUC. In 2021, there was a procurement mandate from the CPUC. It is possible that there will be another procurement mandate from the CPUC as a result of the IRP analyses that are being filed across the state. The purpose of this solicitation is to, number one, contract with resources to meet our midterm reliability procurement mandate that was issued by the CPUC. We need resources that come online in 2023, 24, 25, and 26 to meet the very specific procurement requirements from the CPUC in those years. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm sorry, I will just also mention the second the second intention of the RFO is to contract with long-term resources that are carbon-free and mostly renewable, that can provide renewable energy and meet our customers' needs going forward in a clean manner for the long term. Next slide, please. This is a list of the eligible products in the RFO. If you just look at the product name, they're pretty wonky, but they actually tie, the language on this slide actually ties to the language that was in the CPUC's procurement mandate. And so there were 6 eligible products that we requested offers from the market. Next slide. We received a fairly robust market response, but it was not as robust as our 2020 RFO. This year, we only had 44 unique project sites. In 2020, we had 70 unique project sites, and we had fewer project variations than we did in 2020. We did get offers for all of those 6 projects, and a variety of different technologies. We had offers for projects based in 6 different states. When I made this slide, I said only 1 project in ABCE's service territory. That meant Alameda County, only 1 in Alameda County. Since the city of Stockton was added, basically Stockton was added in 2024 after I made this slide. And so the comment about only 1 in EBCE's service territory is no longer accurate. Next slide, please. We used this, effectively we used the same evaluation criteria that we have used for all of our long-term resource RFOs. We evaluate the competitiveness of each offer based on quantitative and qualitative criteria. We follow a very specific rubric, and the economic value of projects is the most heavily weighted criteria, but we also look at things like, is this an in-county project or is it an in-service territory project? Is the developer committed to using union labor, et cetera, et cetera. And then we shortlist projects based on what looks most valuable using that quantitative criteria and qualitative criteria in the evaluation rubric. Next slide, please. I am bringing forward 2 contracts today and on Wednesday seeking board approval for these 2 contracts. They are resource adequacy only agreements. In November, I will be coming back to the board seeking approval for more contracts from the same RFO, and I will probably be back in December. I don't think that we'll get them all done in November. The 2 contracts I'm seeking approval for are from the same developer. The developer is called Broadreach Power, and they are both 10-year contracts. One is for 5 megawatts of resource adequacy, only resource adequacy from a storage project in San Joaquin County. The other is for 30 megawatts of resource adequacy from a storage contract in Stockton, now in our service territory. Both of these projects will come online on June 1st, 2024. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit of information about the first project, Cascade. We're only contracting for 5 megawatts of resource adequacy from it. San Jose is getting another 5 megawatts. The total project size is 99. It's a 99 megawatt battery. The reason we're not getting more is to count as a resource adequacy resource, you have to go through a specific part of the transmission and interconnection process, and you have to be granted something called deliverability from the CAISO. This project only got 10 megawatts of deliverability, so it only can count for 10 megawatts of resource adequacy in 2024 and 2025. And then in 2026, the remainder of the project should be able to provide resource adequacy. We're not doing an option contract. We're only signing a contract for the 5 megawatts off of this project, the 5 megawatts of RA from this project at this time. Broadreach will use union labor and pay prevailing wages. Next slide. This is the Stockton project. The total project size here is 60 megawatts. There's none of that confusion around deliverability. So it's a 60 megawatt project. EBCE is getting half of the RA from it. San Jose is taking the other half. So we get 30, San Jose gets 30. Both of these projects are well on their way. There is a lot of work that has been done. There have been a lot of permitting. There's been a lot of permitting that's been done. There are interconnection agreements. When we think about how real a project is and how likely it is to be built, there's sort of a scale from idea to something that is actually built or in the process of being built. These two projects are, they're more than just an idea. There is a lot of money and investment that has been made in getting these things online. They have not started construction yet, but they will soon. Next slide, please. Broadreach is a relatively new energy company. They were founded in 2019, but they are comprised of people who have a lot of experience. They have 350 megawatts of battery projects online currently. They're all, to the best of my knowledge, they are all in Texas, and they have over 10 gigawatts of projects in their development pipeline. They are backed by 4 companies listed on this slide, and these are investment funds. They are companies that are basically in the business of investing in other companies. So Broadreach is based in Texas, but they do have a California development team of 3 people, and these 3 people do live in the state of California. And Broadreach, being a new organization, only being in existence for 3 years now, they have not had the opportunity to execute many contracts with CCAs or with California companies, but they do have one RA-only contract executed with Redwood Coast Energy Authority, and that project should come online in May of 2023. Next slide, please. As I come back to the board over the next month or a couple of months, I'm going to continue to fill out this slide and add additional projects to it. So as I've mentioned a number of times already, the contracts that we're seeking approval for are only for resource adequacy. What that means when it comes to a battery project, batteries don't generate electricity the way that wind and solar do. They can charge electricity and discharge it. We don't want we could use all resource adequacy contracts to meet our midterm reliability procurement obligations, but we don't want all resource adequacy contracts because we need generation. We need generation from renewable resources to meet our customers' needs and our commitments to our customers. And we, as Alita has commented, there's value to energy storage, not just the resource adequacy from it, but the ability to arbitrage. In the last presentation, Doug showed that there are hours in the middle of the day in the outer, in going towards 2030 when we could have way too much renewable generation online. Well, we need storage to suck up that renewable generation and then discharge it during the hours of the day when we don't have enough renewable generation online. So we do very much want to add more storage to our portfolio. We have some already, but we do want to add more. And it is my hope that in the coming months, you will see storage projects added to the list. And I believe that is it. If you go forward to the next slide, I think says, next steps. We are close to done negotiating with Broadreach. And so I'm seeking board approval for the Power Resources team to finish negotiations, and then for the CEO to execute the contracts. We will be coming back to the board in November and probably December with more contracts for approval. And then we will be assessing these projects as they reach their development obligations and making sure that they're hitting their development milestones. And then we have to continue, we have already made a number of update filings to the CPUC. We have to continue to make a bunch of update filings to the CPUC about the projects that we're bringing on for compliance with the different procurement mandates. And if we go forward to the next slide, I think it says appendix, and then the slide after that, this is a summary. The next slide is a summary of the resources that are in our portfolio today, contracts that have actually been executed. The first 5 of them are online now and generating, or charging and discharging in the case of storage, and the following ones are in development. And that's the end.
Thank you. If we could keep this slide up, it would be helpful. So just quick clarification on this, and then we'll go to clarifying and public comment. So the only project up now is the Scott Haggerty Wind Energy Center.
No, we have 5 projects online: Golden Field Solar, Scott Haggerty Wind Energy Center, Henrietta D Energy Storage, Tecolote Wind, and the Tulare Solar Center. Those first 5 projects are online.
Right. No, I meant in our service territory.
Oh, in our service territory, that's correct.
Right. And so of the new projects that are being proposed, like what you're looking for approval for, how many new total and how many will be in our service territory?
I can't tell you the total. Of the 2 that I'm seeking board approval for this month, one of the 2 is in Stockton. And I cannot tell you an answer as to exactly how many projects we will seek approval for as a result of this RFO, because we are still actively engaged in negotiations. We will decide which projects to take to the board based on how the negotiations go and whether or not we're able to agree to commercial terms. It is possible that we are evaluating another project that is in our service territory.
Okay, so one of the 2, and is it the 5 megawatt one or the larger one?
No, it's the larger one.
And how many megawatts was that?
30.
30.
Well, the whole project is 60. We're getting 30.
And then you are evaluating one other, so a possibility of 2 more in our service territory. Okay. Thank you for that. If there are clarifying questions for Marie, again, discussion should be held until after we hear public comment. But if you have clarifying questions, then you can ask them now. Member Lutz.
You say this is storage, but you're only buying the resource adequacy.
Yes.
Does that mean we can't, EBCE can't use it for storage?
The developer, Broad Reach Power, is going to operate the project, and the developer will get the financial benefit associated with charging and discharging the project. They did not want to sell us like all of what the battery can do. They want to monetize the asset themselves.
So EBCE will have
we get the compliance attribute of resource adequacy.
Does it actually give us an EBCE any physical attribute?
No, it is a compliance attribute only.
Oh man.
Yep.
Okay.
That's why we don't just want to buy resource adequacy.
Right.
To build on that question, during the blackouts after Diablo went down, one of the big issues was that the agencies that had provided resource adequacy services were not actually required to sell that energy or release that energy into the grid when it was needed. So many of them sold it to like Arizona because the cost was, like they made more money by selling it to Arizona. Will our contract have a requirement that if we need to use it for resource adequacy, that we actually get the attribute? That we get the actual product?
A resource adequacy contract obligates batteries, these projects, to follow the resource adequacy rules. If they don't do what they are required to do in the resource adequacy program, if they don't make themselves available for resource adequacy along certain rules, then they have contractual penalties with us under the contract. And then if there's sort of a different timeline when they could also break rules, if you will, if they break those rules, then the energy market, the CAISO, has a way of whacking them.
Okay, and is there a way to see that, like what our language is on that? Because
do
we
not.
saw those loopholes before.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure when you're talking about with Diablo going down and it causing blackouts. I don't know when that was. But in 2019, when there were blackouts, that might be what you're talking about.
The CPUC decided that Diablo had gone out so many times that they'd rather not count on it for adequacy. So chose to do the blackouts. I mean, that's in their report. I can send you that language. It's very clearly stated.
Okay, sure, that would be great. So I think you're referring to the 2019 power outages.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, in 2019, when natural gas plants tripped offline, there were some resources that were effectively wheeling through California and delivering energy outside of the state. We have the ability to enforce the language that is in our contract, that it doesn't go down to every minute or interval of time and of how a resource performs. That there's a distinction. So up in the planning horizon, the way that the resource performs is under the basically under the purview of our contract. But then when it comes to actual real-time operation, it's under the purview of CAISO, and CAISO has responsibility for how it actually operates. We have not posted the contracts at this time because we're still finalizing them, and we don't typically go back and post them afterwards, but that's something that can be discussed with the board.
Okay, I might even just be curious, so that's fine. All right, so are there any members of the public with their hand raised? I see Alita Dupree. So Alita, we'll go with 2 minutes.
Alita Dupree, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thanks again, Chair Ann Olivia. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her. This is very important. I'm going to have to read up on this. RA and etc. But I believe and agree with the basic principles of what we're doing here, which is these contracts are going to actually do something. We can talk about storage all day, but this means that we're going to get ready to do storage. And RA is an important part of this work. And seeing that they are in the Stockton area means that it's a localized resource. Small distributed storage is just as important as having a very large utility scale storage, because then the energy doesn't have to travel very far in order to serve the people. So Stockton is an important part of our territory. I'm looking forward to Stockton coming online. And so this is a way that we're going to help Stockton and perhaps help relieve some of the congestion that happens on the grid during the times of overabundance or shortage. So this definitely needs to go before the board, where I hope that we will see agreement and approval, and I think we will. But this is the start of something big. I wish I had storage in here. So, I mean, I'm charging my iPad and my earphones. You can never have enough. Well, at home, you can never have enough storage. But this is a good start. We got to do this. Thank you.
There's no further public comment.
All right, then we will go to question and commentary from the CAC. Member Souza. How was that?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It's a lot. It just comes to mind that, all of these clean energy organizations are in competition with PG&E, which is a large corporation, very established. I like the idea that you're collaborating with San Jose. I was looking at the chart from Tom. Looks like they're doing pretty well when it comes to carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. Their numbers are pretty good. Collaborating as a clean energy organization with other clean energy areas and organizations is great. I think that more of that needs to happen. PG&E's held the crown for a long time, and you know there's problems there. There's and I'm sure you're in competition, and it's you know kind of David and Goliath. So again, I like the idea that there's some collaboration going on, and maybe we can even learn from each other as far as how to keep the costs down and to keep the carbon dioxide and emissions down, you know, from each other. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from this body? All right. Camera keeps going off. Seeing none, then Marie, thank you. And if I can get the answers to the other presentation, that would be really super helpful, even if we don't include it until the meeting minutes are posted or whatever. It would be helpful if I could get those answers prior to the next meeting. And yeah, I think we can let you go and we can do our motions. Thank you. To all of the staff, we really are grateful for the presentations and the thorough engagement and presentation. So we have two items in front of us where the staff are seeking an action from the CAC, and both the first item is to approve, they're seeking an action to approve the filing of the updated integrated resource planning analysis to the CPUC, which is a compliance item. Is there any further discussion on this? And if no, I would be seeking a motion.
I'll move.
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion on the table is from Member Lutz to approve the staff recommendation on the filing of the integrated resource planning analysis with the CPUC, and the motion is seconded by Member Hernandez. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote?
Great, thank you. Member Landry.
Abstain.
Member Hugh.
Yes.
Member Luth. Member Luth?
Yes.
Member Swaminathan. Member Lakshman.
Yes.
Member Taria. Member Pacheco. Member Souza.
Approved.
Member Carr.
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Member Hernandez.
Yes.
Member Lutz.
Yes.
Chair Eldred.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The second item would be on the long-term energy and resource adequacy contracts. We do not have to make a motion on this item if we don't want to. We are able to support or recommend against the contracts. I believe what they are asking us for right now, and Alex, if you're still on here, or Doug, probably Doug, we are clarifying that what staff is asking us to do is, or what the staff is asking the board to do is approve going into contract with the two resources presented, the one for 30 megawatts in Stockton and the one for 5 megawatts outside of our service territory, and to pursue development of the other potential resources and bringing those back to the board for approval. Is that correct? Doug or Alex? Adrian, do you know if staff?
Yes, I am. I do not. I can check to see if they are present, but I can also check the board agenda.
I'm checking the board agenda right now. Are folks interested in making a motion on this one or no?
Seems like it makes sense to move it forward. Would there be a reason not to?
I would love staff to be present to clarify their request to us.
We'll pause.
We could approve the initial two that they presented us, and I think it's approval to allow them to finalize the contract and have Nick sign it.
Mm-hmm.
We would be bolstering their support, correct?
Yep, that is correct. So opening the board of directors agenda.
Sorry, can I jump in, Chair Eldred, with also a clarifying question?
Yes.
So on, maybe this is just a typo, but I think in our agenda packet on slide 7, it says seeking approval for 3 contracts, but I think we only heard about the 2 RA ones. So was there a third one? I think I'm getting a little confused.
Oh, and actually in the board packet, it actually has the word 3 spelled out. Adrian, can you send a message to Doug and Alex and like on Slack?
I just did.
Thank you. We can.
Sorry, this is Doug. I am here. If there's a question for me.
Yep, I'm here too. Sorry about that.
Okay. Hi, Katie, in the background.
Yep, I've got my my assistant here.
Mm-hmm. Member, who will you restate your question?
Sure. Hi, Alex. Hi, Doug. Just wanted to clarify on the action item regarding the RA pieces, the resource adequacy contracts. In the slides, I think on slide 7, it talks about 3 contracts. And I just wanted to clarify if we're here to approve 2 advancing to the board, or if there were 3 and I might have missed the 3rd. And then I'm happy to do my homework there.
I'm not aware of a 3rd, but Doug, do you?
I can't speak to the contracts. That's Marie's area more than mine.
All right, she definitely said the 2. So y'all should just be aware that in the board presentation, the written report also says 3 resolutions authorizing the CEO to execute. Oh, no, to execute agreements for 2 projects. So clarification on that would be helpful. So did somebody, Member Hernandez, did you want to move approval of supporting the 2 contracts?
Yes, the 10-year 5 megawatt resource adequacy only contract for battery storage in San Joaquin County, which is the first bullet point on page 7 of the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And that 10-year 30 megawatt resource adequacy only contract for battery storage in Stockton. And so San Joaquin County. So those are the 2 that I understood we heard and would support those.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is there a second for that?
Jim Lutz, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Lutz. Adrian, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Great, thank you. Member Landry?
Yes.
Member Hugh?
Yes.
Member Liu?
Yes.
Member Swaminathan? Member Lakshman?
Yes.
Member Tavria? Member Pacheco? Member Souza?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Carr? Member Carr? I'll come back to Member Carr.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Hernandez?
Yes.
Member Lutz?
Yes.
Chair Eldridge?
Yep.
The motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. So I just want to check in with folks. It is 8:38, and we were going to be hearing something about the new legislation involving the life extension for Diablo Canyon and its impact on the PCIA. Would you like to move this to another meeting, or would you like to hear this tonight?
How long is the presentation approximately?
Hi, this is Alec Ward. Presentation is 2 slides, should be pretty quick, and then open to questions and discussion.
It is pretty late. All right, so I'm going to do a quick.
Would it have any impact doing it now versus our next meeting?
The legislation has been passed and signed, so nothing would change within that time period.
All right, I'm going to do a quick poll with you guys. If you would like to remain on this meeting and hear it tonight, please use the raise hand feature so I can count. All right, can you please put your hands down? If you would like to move this to another meeting, please use the raise hand feature to indicate your vote that way. And the nays have it. So we will be, what is that called when we move it to another meeting?
Table.
It's a different word. We're delaying it. We're moving it to another meeting. We're going to do that. So with that, we will delay this item to probably our next meeting, which is on November 4th, November 14th. So now we will move to agenda item 8, CAC member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future CAC agendas. I hope you know that we really do track these things and are doing our very best to get to them. Is there anything that has not been brought up that you feel is important to bring up tonight? Member Lutz.
Tom Kelly keeps bringing up the power content and a comparison of the power content to other, like MCE. And
actively working on that, Jim, for sure. Actively
okay.
working on it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. Me too. Member Landry?
Yes, on that same topic, will we have a presentation or will there be a comparison?
I don't know that answer yet, Cynthia. We're working on getting it on a future agenda item, and I'm working actively with staff on making sure that Tom's comments are addressed and we have something, and making sure that it matches with something that is going on. So we are actively looking at it, and I don't know what the presentation style will be, but we are actively listening.
Thank you.
All right. So The other thing that I would like staff to follow up on is I've requested repeatedly that a recruitment schedule for the CAC open positions. And I would like to encourage folks here to consider running for chair next time. So because we'll be having we'll have much of a new board seated after these November elections. Please do remember to vote. Please vote, actively vote. It's important, people. And so the new board will get seated, and we'll be looking at new CAC members once those folks are seated. So far, I haven't heard any commitment to replace the members that we are down prior to spring sometime. So I'm hoping to bring you some kind of update in the interim of that, but we will be looking for likely a new chair and vice. So if you are interested in those positions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about what that looks like. And I hope you have a really great evening. Seeing no hands raised or further announcements, we will adjourn this meeting to Monday, November 14th, 2022 at 6 p.m. There will again be an in-person option at our office in Oakland, and it will be noted. Adrian, you look like you're saying a thing.
It'll be at the Oakland Center at I think it's 1000 Broadway in downtown Oakland at the 12th Street BART station, around that area.
And there will still be a remote option to participate for folks who cannot or choose not to participate in person. Thank you all for sticking with us through that.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
All right.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, and Olivia.
Good night.
Thank you, Adrian, everyone.
Nice to see you guys.